I'd like to introduce our interpreter, Magda, who will explain how the Spanish translation will work tonight.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andrew. Um, um, Buenas tardes a todos. Yo soy Magdalena Castro Lúdez, cofundadora de ALMA, Servicios de Interpretación y Traducción. Bienvenidos al seminario de hoy que se titula Comprender las colocaciones no públicas y sus alternativas. Las personas que desean escuchar la presentación en español lo pueden hacer yendo a la parte de abajo de la pantalla, hacer clic en el globo y escoger la opción español. O también pueden ir a los tres puntos que aparecen también en la parte de abajo de la pantalla a mano derecha y escoger la opción español. También quiero recordarles a los participantes que mantengan sus micrófonos en silencio y las cámaras apagadas para evitar interferencias en la presentación y la grabación. Si tienen preguntas, pueden hacerlas en el chat del Zoom y al final serán contestadas. Ahora los dejo con Alicia Ardila Fortier, cofundadora de ALMA, quien va a hacer la interpretación simultánea del seminario. Gracias. Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome, and thank you, Magda, for translating tonight. As a reminder, please do keep your cameras off and remain muted during the presentation. You may put questions in the chat, and our panelists will address those towards the end of our meeting. We will be recording the presentation and posting it in both English and Spanish on our website in a couple of days. We're recording tonight's presentation, and you will also get a copy. Without further delay, let's get into tonight's conversation, understanding non-public placements and their alternatives. We have three wonderful panelists. First, we have Beth Ann Hancock, who is a special education advocate that works with families and also for us here at the Autism Society of Maryland. She provides both one-on-one support. She has worked in training and is a certified family peer specialist for over 4 years with the Maryland Coalition of Families. She's been involved with special education since 2008 when her autistic son started experiencing his own difficulties with demands in the classroom. She served with CCAC and is a member of several community disability advocacy groups. Next, we have Dory Flynn. She is the executive director of the Maryland Association of Non-Public Special Education Facilities, better known as MANSEF. That's a nonprofit association of schools serving children with disabilities. She's been in this capacity for 27 years, advocating for 70 non-public special education schools for children with disabilities that serve nearly 4,000 students. Lastly, we have Dr. Melissa Brunson, who is our Director of Special Education in Howard County Public Schools. She's recently joined Howard County Public Schools with prior leadership roles in Washington County and also Montgomery County, starting in the classroom and being in a series of progressive leadership roles. She's brought a couple of friends along with her tonight to assist with her presentation and questions. We have both Joanne Hoffman, our Director of Non-Public Schools and Compliance. I'm sure I only did part of your title. I apologize. And we also have Christine Erickson, who is our head of specialized, Kristen Erickson, excuse me, our head of specialized programs in Howard County. So why have we brought these great speakers together tonight? We've been working on this issue of non-public placements here at the Autism Society probably for a long time, but especially since 2020. These placements have surged throughout the state, so much so that we've heard parents waiting for months for a placement, even if they aren't recommended. So we wanted to do this webinar, first of all, so families can understand what non-public schools offer and the process by which families can choose them and end up in a non-public placement. Also, our education laws are set up to promote what we call a least restrictive environment that's inclusive of people with disabilities, students with disabilities in their community. So really, non-publics are only a choice when county schools can't meet our kids' needs. So we also want to talk tonight about what county schools can do to provide more options closer to home for families. So we won't be outstripping the needs of non-publics and also the budgets of the counties. So that's why we've had this panel here from different perspectives, from the public school system, from the non-public school group, and someone who's worked directly with families as they've navigated this choice. So we're going to have some opening presentations and ample time for questions and answers. So please do jump in with questions throughout this evening, and we'll open it up at the end. So with that, I'm going to start with Dory. Can you just tell us more about the network of non-public schools you work with? And overall, like what is the mission of non-public schools? And can you just give us some examples of the students or the families that they serve?
Certainly. Good evening. I want to thank the Autism Society of Maryland for inviting MANSEF here tonight. You all do amazing work, and it's an honor to be a partner with you. Andy has really covered everything that I want to say, but here are a few other additional comments. What is MANSEF? Again, Maryland Association of Non-Public Special Education Facilities. It's quite a mouthful, and one of the very first things that my father ever said when I got the job was try to change that name. But here we are 50 years later. Our mission is for MANSEF to be the collective voice and essential resource for non-public special education schools to champion the continuum of services for students with special needs. So it's really to be here on behalf of our schools, our members. We are a voluntary association, which means that not every school that serves students with special needs is a part of MANSEF. As Andy said, we're representing 70 schools, serving approximately 3,800 publicly funded students. That number has actually inched up to almost 4,000 because we also serve private pay students in some of our members. And again, my role is to be an advocate, help parents. I take calls every day of parents who want to learn more about some of the non-public schools. Why we exist. The federal education law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, states the following, that each local education agency must ensure that a continuum of alternative placements is available to meet the needs of children with disabilities for special education and related services. So very simply, IDA mandates a full educational continuum. And what does the continuum look like? And the continuum has instruction in regular classes, special classes, special schools. It can be home instruction, instruction in hospitals and other, institutions. There's actually been some talk about adding in virtual online education when and if IDEA ever gets reauthorized. But I believe that local school systems can consider virtual education as one of the options in that continuum. I want to start out by talking about the word non-public because it is so confusing. In Maryland, there are two types of non-public schools. Private pay schools, where parents are writing a tuition check, and the publicly funded non-public special education schools, primarily the schools that obviously that's what I represent. Having just said that, Maryland also allows for a combination because some of the MANSEF schools do take private pay students. And there are some private pay schools serving students with special needs that can accept a public pay student on a case-by-case basis. So the word non-public is really very confusing. And I like to try to make that distinction if I can. Our schools, the Mansfield schools, are approved under the state COMAR regulations. And again, some of our affiliate members are approved under a different category. But our schools follow the public school curriculum because we are serving public school students. We award public high school diplomas, and again, unless the student is a private pay student. But we follow the same standards for teacher licensure. And so that's a critical function as well, because we want to ensure that we are in partnership with our local school system colleagues. In determining placement, an IEP team must start by considering the least restrictive environment. And whatever that might look like would be appropriate, that's appropriate for that specific student. So again, we're here to work on behalf of the public schools when they need us. It's really critical for families to be informed about the full continuum and that it exists, because parents are full and equal members of the IEP team. So you have to speak up. The schools, I can start naming the names of some of the members, but they are serving children based on age, some start at age 5 and go all the way up to age 21. Some schools are serving children with autism, and some are serving children with emotional disabilities. So it's really case by case specific, and each school sort of has its own unique culture and climate and environment. So it really depends upon the IEP, the goals and objectives, and where that IEP can be implemented. So it's critical to also remember there's no requirement in the IDA that a student be placed and fail in a less restrictive setting before moving to what is unfortunately called a more restrictive one. And so that's important to know, that if a school system needs to consider a non-public placement, they can do so because it's a continuum. And we are here to support that. We are limited in the number of students that we can serve. As Andy said, many of our programs have a waiting list, and we too struggle, like the public school systems, with staffing. It's a challenge. We've recently been working on teacher pay parity so that our teachers can earn what the public schools earn, the public school teachers. So we're here to support. We're here as a resource. These are therapeutic environments. They might have more services than a public school could provide. But again, it really comes down to ensuring that the student is appropriately placed and that the IEP can be implemented with fidelity and educational benefit for that particular student. So the IEP team needs to consider a range of placements. It's their obligation to do so, and we want to be a part of that consideration. So I can stop there and let Beth Ann talk about the parent perspective.
Dory, that was a great overview. I have some follow-up questions, but yeah, let's bring Beth Ann into the conversation. As an advocate, let's just start by, let me just ask you, why have you seen families turn increasingly to non-public placements over the last few years? And if you can, what should the families on this call expect, if they, like Dory, are in a position where they might want to consider a non-public placement?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. First, I want to start with a lot of calls that I receive is, if it's just a straight off the bat, a parent saying, I need my kid in a non-public, I want to start by saying that a lot of that is based on perception and not reality. So I want to talk about the perception of a lot of families and why they want to move forward with non-public placement, and then what the reality of that process is. Excuse me. So a lot of families are learning how to navigate the complex special education process. And in that, they speak with other families, and they may hear from other families about how much their child is thriving in a non-public school. And then they have this perception that the non-public school is this award or, something like that. There's also an aspect of a sense of agency in selecting a school where with a district placement, you're placed in the school program by boundary. With the non-public placement, there's a feeling from parents of a sense of agency where they get to select based on, it is a limited number of schools when you're in the process, but that agency does feel like an empowerment for the family. There's also parents who feel unheard by their IEP team, or after many discussions have experienced deception, which does happen, and they lose trust in the district, and they want to get out of the district, but they can't afford to pay privately for a school for their child, and so they feel like the only answer is a non-public school. The reality of the process is that your child's IEP is developed through data, through evaluations, present levels of performance, alignment with state standards, and functional needs. The goals are developed that way. And if your child is not making anticipated progress in their IEP goals, then the team needs to discuss what supports are necessary in order to meet those goals. Sometimes a child's supported service needs are greater than what a district can provide. If the IEP team agrees with that statement, then generally the district process is to refer the child's case to a central IEP team, which then meets with the family and the school to go over the IEP needs and determine where these needs may be sufficiently met for your student to make progress on their goals. Within a school, a ManSEF school generally, a school that follows the Maryland state standards. Then admission packets are sent to schools. Families generally through that process then tour the schools. The schools invite the family, they meet them, they interview the parents, the child. Some schools do a trial day, some schools do 3 trial days, and just to see if it's a good fit for their school. And then after that, the school makes a decision on whether or not they can offer acceptance to the child. So that's the process.
Yeah, Beth Ann, I just wanted to follow up with you if I can.
Sure.
I would say within the kind of community of people and some people I see in attendance tonight, there have been 2 themes over the last few years that have, I think, led people to consider non-public placements that I'm most familiar with, and I wanted you to react to them and talk a little bit about them. One, there are students that have had challenging behaviors in school, especially after COVID, related to mental health and other dynamics, and a feeling that those behaviors were getting worse in the public schools. And just speaking for autistic students, which is obviously one reason we're here tonight, some of it is just kind of being overwhelmed by the school environment, and it's not meeting their needs. And the other, I think, is communication and reading. So, certain aspects of instruction that have been really hard for some students coming out of COVID. Can you just comment on those themes and if that matches what you've seen, or any thoughts for parents tonight who may have some of those concerns right now?
Sure. So behaviors are generally addressed in the IEP process and are included in a child's IEP under a behavioral intervention plan. And so that is also a plan that has goals that and data is collected to track progress. And so if a student is not making progress with a behavior intervention plan, that is another data point that perhaps the district is unable to service that student. But that process needs to kind of flesh out generally in order to see if they can make progress in a less restrictive environment while they're there. And if they're making progress in other areas. The same with academics, the goals, the academic goals, again, data is collected on the anticipated progress that the team has already met to determine what they expect that child to be able to accomplish in 1 year's time. And if they're not making the academic progress and supports are added and they still aren't making progress, that's another reason why a referral to a non-public school would be made.
Thank you, Beth Ann. Maury, seeing a question in the chat, please put some more in and we'll continue the conversation. I'm going to bring in our friends from Howard County next, to kind of give for the advocate perspective, the non-public perspective, just the public school perspective. Maybe starting with this, Melissa, can you describe what a continuum of services is? And maybe just give some examples of how you're thinking of, modernizing that continuum in Howard County to give families more choices in county, especially when we've heard from Dory that some of these non-public schools are full. So why don't you just start by there? You can describe what a continuum of services is and what you're thinking of doing in Howard County.
So hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Brunson. I'm the Executive Director of Special Education. I started working in the county on November 3rd, 2025. So I'm a little over 4 months. And definitely coming from Montgomery, a larger county, to a smaller county, Washington County, and then between county, and learning all the things I need to know that occurs in this county. There are some things that streamline and there are the same no matter where you go, but then there are some things that are unique to the county themselves. So to jump into the question that you had asked, when we talk about a continuum of services, we're really thinking starting with the least restrictive environment. So anytime a student has been identified as having an educational disability that requires an IEP and specially designed instruction, the next step is to determine where those services can be best met. And that's the first step. And so on the continuum, you always want to start with the environment where they can spend majority of their time with the typically developing peers. And that would be what we would consider the general education setting. And I just want you to know, like, I'm also speaking in a general sense because, again, like I actually been in Baltimore City to start as a teacher. So I've been in 4 counties now, including Howard. So that's the expectation across the board. IDEA is a federal law, and the Code of Maryland are what we go by in Maryland. But they all are the same for the most part, generally speaking. So we start off with having a student spend the majority of their time in a general ed environment with support. So we always look at that. Once the IEP is developed, and IEP is individualized educational program for those that don't know what that fully stands for, but the individualized side to it is that the IEP is made and is customized for that student. And it's almost like a contract that we must follow. The services, the IEP, the way it's developed, will foretell what we believe services can be best met. And then we determine with that continuum, starting with gen ed, and we have to start there, especially when they are first found eligible. We start there. And we want to see what can we do to accommodate the student in the general education environment the best way we possibly can. In some cases, we find that even at early eligibility, some students their needs cannot be met in that larger school classroom environment. Then we have to go to another type of environment. So we might pick a smaller one that has maybe a set of services, again, where the student can be best met. And if we're speaking specifically about Howard County, we do have a few programs in the county. It's posted on our website. It would take me a while to go through all of them, but just know that it starts off with resource. That would be largely your, if I stick with elementary, and across the board resources when they spend majority of their time in the general education setting. And then we have other programs. And I do want to say this too, just as a disclaimer, some of these programs, we are expanding and redesigning them. And so we did share with the board a draft of our new continuum of services. So you may hear programming that you've not heard before, or there isn't any public facing document yet on the website for it yet, because we haven't fully finalized it. So I'm just letting you know. So if you hear anything, you're like, oh, I've not heard that program before, it's probably because it's a new redesign. And I'll be careful to share. I don't know how much depth you want me to go into, Andy, but if you would like for me to sort of share the programs.
Yeah, yeah, I would think, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's people that are in different places in this audience, but some people have been tracking this for a while. So I think going into a little detail about some of the new programs you presented, to the board a couple weeks ago, would be really helpful.
So one of the newer programs in elementary that we're looking at is primary transition. So we recognize a lot of students that they may have significant cognitive disabilities. However, they may not necessarily be at that stage where, they may not require an alternative curriculum to access their education. So they might come out of early intervention programs. They are coming right into kindergarten, and their needs are, they're sort of like that in between. They're sort of in between. Maybe they need extra guidance to develop social skills, communication, regular classroom habits. They're working below grade level, maybe. Some may have a cognitive disability, but not that significant. Just providing a smaller, predictable environment. So some of our schools may have the primary transition, which is a K-2 grade level class, and it may be set up differently at different schools that may have this program, meaning that there may be a classroom, or it may look like more of a co-taught or integrated class. It just depends on the needs of the student. So we allow that flexibility for a primary transition class K-2 because it depends on the needs of the students that are coming in. Again, some of them are coming in through early intervention. Some of them are coming into K from various places with an IEP, but they might need like that in between sort of class, and not necessarily be able to, services can be met in that large classroom size. They just need something smaller, but they're also not ready to be identified as a student that requires an alternative curriculum. So that's the best way to describe that one. Although, like I said, once the public facing document comes out, it'll have a better and deeper description of that program. And then there were already existing ones. So I'm probably just going to highlight the ones that are newer, and then I'll just mention the ones that are existing. So we have the elementary primary learner, that's grades K-2. We have the elementary upper learner, that's grades 3-5. Then we have the compass, that's grades K-5. That's more of a social emotional behavioral support class. A new one that we've added, and again, this may not necessarily show up next school year as we looked at the needs across our school district, but we did recognize that we needed an enhanced type of compass that has a therapeutic component. So that's a newer one. That model provides specialized academic, behavioral, and social emotional help. Students learn in a predictable, structured setting while practicing their skills in broader school environments. It's an enhanced approach. It includes dedicated mental health and behavioral supports, ensuring that students stay connected to general education activities as outlined in their IEP. And again, with these students that would receive that service, they would, if they have related services, that would also be included as well. So that would be a newer one. I'm not for certain if that one's going to be one that may show up for next school year. It may show up down the line. We're not really sure yet. We have another one that we're looking into called the RISE program. RISE stands for Regulation, Instruction, and Sensory Engagement. And this one we are in the process of developing, but we see a need to actually have a program type like this one for next school year. So RISE provides specialized academic, behavioral, and social emotional support. It's designed for students who need intensive help with sensory processing and emotional regulation, particularly when communication challenges impact behavior. Using a neurodivergent affirming approach, students learn in a structured setting while practicing new skills in broader school environments. Students maintain access to general education activities as outlined in their IEP, and all related services are provided based on individual needs. There are a few other ones, like I said, I'll mention the ones that are here, like regional academic life skills with a kinder focus. We have regional academic life skills, or ALS. That's what we call it, grades 1 through 5, which is an elementary focus. We have a home academic life skills 3 through 5, which is in all HCPS elementary schools. Of course, we have the regional academic life skills 3 through 5, and they are regionally based in certain schools. Then we have other ALS programming, structured practice for academic readiness, a SPARK program that's identified at 1 school right now. We have another one that has graduated guidance that's identified at 3 schools. We have another ALS programming, which is the complex learner class grades 3 through 5. They're in 2 schools. Then when you get into middle school, we have obviously our middle school resource program, just like we have in elementary, we have the resource program there. Then we have the middle school intensive resource program, which is a relatively newer program. It currently rests at Limekiln, and we have a starter program. We have a starter of a program at Patuxent Valley Middle School. That program will be expanding next year. Then we have middle school compass. Then we have middle school academic life skills, home ALS, which is in all HCPS middle schools. Then we have middle school regional academic life skills at certain schools within the district. Then we have middle school regional, which is a differentiated model. They're at certain middle school sites. Then at the high school level, we have high school resource. We have intensive resource, which is currently at 1 high school. We have high school compass, which is at 3 high schools. Then we have high school ALS, the home ALS, as well as regional ALS. And home ALS is in all HCPS high schools. And then we have other programming too, like the Bridges program, middle and high. We have Cedar Lane for our elementary, middle, and high school students. And then there are transition programs. So I'm mentioning pretty much all the programs that are included in our county. And I did want to just follow up on something you said, Andrew, the reason why to even bring up these, the continuum of programs and adding new ones and expanding the redesign, because we do realize that we do have a high number of students that are having challenges and can best be served in different environments. And that's part of the reason, the redesign and the expansion. But also we recognize that we do have students that, we get to a certain point in their academic life, or we get students that come in. It just depends on the student over time. It just depends on their needs, and then we get to a point where we're challenged with serving them in the public school environment, and so we would look to non-public. And when we look at non-public, we have to first make sure that the student has a documented emotional disability. Some people don't realize that, they think of non-public as, any and every student. Again, if we're making decisions as a district, as a public LEA, we're making decisions for students. These students typically have an educational disability, and they have some level of significance, whether it's behavioral, mental health, emotional needs. Some of them can have medical needs or physical needs. It just depends on the needs of the student. Some of them have 1, 2, or more multiple disabilities. Again, it just really does depend. And we have to design an IEP that's going to meet the student's needs. And first we look within the public school and see what set of services that we can provide. And we have to do different things. I think Beth kind of mentioned a little bit about that. When we're at IEP, when we're working on IEP and we have the IEP team and we have especially design instruction for that student, we certainly have to try everything within the public school setting, and we have to look for programming that would meet the students' needs. And if for some reason we're unable to do that, we might make a recommendation to, and Joanne can speak more to this part. And I do want to bridge this with Joanne. What week is this for you? This is week 3 for her.
Yes.
And Chris Erickson, even though she's not on the panel, this is like, I think today made her first week. I
Yes.
think Wednesday, yeah, she's just been in on a week. So just mind us, we all have a lot of experience working in Montgomery County. That's kind of how I know them. So like I said, some things are the same. And then of course, there are unique differences county to county. So as we're giving sort of answers to things, you'll see, you know, some things, I'll say might be answers that reflect maybe some of our experiences, because again, they're pretty much streamlined and all the same across counties. But an IEP team might make a decision to send a case to central IEP. And when we're taking the case to central IEP, there's a potential that we might need to look for a non-public placement, because we're saying this is a strong possibility we may not be able to meet the needs of the student in the current public setting. We don't have that service here, so we may look outwardly for that. So hopefully, Andy, I answered. I know I said a lot, but hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, and I wanted then to thank you, Melissa. That was very very comprehensive, and as you said, there's some materials from the board meeting, and you'll be putting out more materials. I know as a parent myself that's gone through Central Place, and I was looking for that continuum and trying to understand everything. So it'll be good when it's up on the website. I want
Can
to
I say one thing before you move on?
Oh,
Andy?
yeah.
Just one quick thing.
Yeah.
As I'm sharing these programs with you and I'm giving you descriptions, I just want you to know when we did express it to the board, a lot of this still kind of remains in draft form. So
Right.
I just want to put that disclaimer out there, especially the newer programs. Now that we have Chris Erickson on board, who's our director of specialized programming, we wanted her to give some oversight. Like she's sort of taken over with her team. But we got to a certain point with design of these new programs. So I just want you to know there are going to be a couple more iterations and maybe, you know, tweaks to it. But generally speaking, these are the identified programs. I just wanted to kind of firm that up. So when you're looking for them, again, we'll have that public facing document ready to go for the public by the summer. But, you know, we're still going through iterations, making sure everything is clear and it's pretty tight. And I do want to reflect to every one of you that when I mentioned to you, I was very specific to call them services, because a lot of times we say, oh, this program this is a program, and that's the language that we use in a general sense, but it's really about the services that can be provided. So you'll hear us sort of use that word service over program, and that's intentional.
Yeah, and just to echo, because you put a lot out there, a couple of things that you've been working on that have come up in the past in discussions. The intensive resource curriculum is one, you know, that had some success at one school, you know, expanded to another one. The RISE program, which, you know, deals with some of the sensory environment needs that are important for autistic students and others. That transitions program from kindergarten, from early intervention to kindergarten. It's a challenging transition for a lot of students across the state, because some of those programs are a little smaller, and then they go to all of a sudden 30 kids in the classroom, and maybe with a little more support, they could stay in the public schools before going to a non-public, you know, at that time. So that was all really helpful. Okay, we've been hearing really a fair amount from our panelists, and we have a pretty active chat that I want to get to. But before I did get there, I mean, I just want to throw out to all the panelists just one open question. If anyone was going to ask you, saw at a conference or you met a parent, you know, Dory, Beth Ann, Melissa, what are some of the pros and cons of non-publics for families? I just heard about this. What are some of the pros and cons? What do I know about them? Beth Ann, you go first.
I'd like to start, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I also want to add that my child did attend a non-public school, actually three different non-public schools through his school career from second grade all the way through graduation. And one of the main drawbacks was distance. My child was on a bus 3 to 4 hours a day. At one point, I actually took a job near where his non-public school was so that I could drive him in the morning and spend that time with him. Because we lost a lot of time, with our child because he was on the bus. He actually enjoyed the bus though. So for him, that was okay because he took a nap. He brought a pillow and a blanket and he took a nap on the bus. So that was helpful for him and he got into the routine of that, but it's not the best situation for that. So I just wanted to put that out there that a lot of families experience that there are no, and I did see in the chat, somebody talked about there are no non-public schools in their county and how do we account for that distance? And so I know that that's also a consideration for CIP teams is the distance going to be worth, the access to these services?
Beth Ann, I agree, because my positive would be that they're flexible programs in the sense that non-public schools do have a little bit more flexibility and are smaller programs, so that one school might only have 100 students, one school might only have 30 students. So that's a benefit in the sense that there's much more individualization that can take place, in my opinion. And the drawback, the negative, would certainly be, again, I agree, distance. We are currently in the process of opening a non-public school on the Eastern Shore, the lower Western Shore as well. So we're trying to solve some of that Calvert County problem, and then over by Wicomico County. We also just recently had a school open up in another school in Hartford County. So we are hearing the call that more programs are needed because, again, there is a strong need.
And I also, unless Dr. Brunson wants to speak, I also reflecting on the chat, somebody asked about the summer programs. And so, and Dory can probably tell you about more of the percentage of programs that have the 11-month program versus the 10-month program. But in my experience, all of the non-public schools do offer ESY if they're a 10-month program. And it's at the school and it's with the same teachers. So there is also the benefit of that continuity for a student, especially a student who needs that routine in order to make progress and keep the progress that they've made. And a lot of schools are 11-month as well.
Right. On our website is the MANSEF membership directory. And so there is a profile of each school and it lists out the types of students they serve, the age ranges, and whether they have ESY or summer school program. So again, most of them do.
I was just going to add, because everybody's taken all my talking points, so I keep scratching them off. But so thank you for being so thorough. But the MANSEF handbook is a wonderful resource. I frequently refer to it. I can't keep all that information in my head, but they really separate it by county, by type of disability that is served, just any number of ways you can think of looking up information. It's there, and it's very easy to read. It's user-friendly. And again, schools are 10, 11, 12 month. They do offer ESY. I just want to jump in about maybe one other con in my mind is the lack of general education peers, because there would be no access at that point in time. And when you add on the travel time distance, that also can impact other after school activities or building that connection with maybe your neighborhood peers.
Correct. I agree.
And Joanne, thank you for jumping in on that one, because I was going to mention the lack of access to peers and community. They miss that. They make peers at the non-publics, but they live all over. And so when they come home, they may not necessarily have that connection with the peers in their neighborhood.
Thanks, everyone. Let's jump into some of the questions from the audience in the chat. One question we had from our first question, I think it's a good one to start with, actually, from Stephanie. Why does it often take so long for the IEP team or district to agree that they cannot meet a student's need, even after a period, even years of documented lack of progress? Maybe Melissa and Joanne, you've been around this for a long time. Maybe you want to jump in and start with that one. And I'm sure Beth Ann, you have some ideas there.
Sure, I know Melissa's going to wait for me to jump in on this one. I want to say, and I don't know what the time frame has been for this particular person, and sometimes it does seem to take longer than we would like, even as maybe school representatives and as families. But really removing a student from general education and putting them in a more restrictive environment is a really serious decision that has to be well thought out and be data driven. And we want to be sure that we're providing, making tweaks, adding supports, etc., making adjustments as much as possible to see if we can still educate and serve students in the public school setting. But we do recognize there is a point in time when that does not become feasible. And that's when we come to the table at a central IEP meeting to consider other educational placements.
I want to just, Joanne, if I don't mean to put you on the spot, but there was a common, Dory mentioned a common phrase that people hear, that you have to fail before you be considered for non-public placement. In your view, is that the right way of thinking about it?
Absolutely not. No. Children are not experiments or to be experimented with in terms of, well, let's put this in place and just see how they do. It is really the supports and services should be well thought out, have a system for collecting, reviewing, analyzing, and tweaking data to continue to make changes. With any type of intervention or services, you're looking at least the very minimum 6 to 8 weeks implementation. And that's data collection, looking at it, trying to make changes and going through another cycle. So there should be, a plan, a do, a study, an act kind of revolving process. And I know it does take, I will tell you, for years of doing this, there are different time frames in terms of the school moving faster than the parent may be ready for, or the parent feeling that they're not being supported or heard by their repeated requests for, let's try something different. We've tried this, we've tried that, etc. The main goal really is that collaboration piece, and for us to all remember why we're in this role and what we're doing is to serve students.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Let's go to our second question from Ms. Cheryl Matai, and I apologize if I said your name incorrect. So this parent is, they share their story that they're further down the line in their IEP where they're needing to explore some non-public options in addition to a public option. Their goals are to make academic progress, and they had two questions. One, I think, is kind of for Dory. How do we navigate the list of ManSEF schools to see which ones might allow their student to meet their needs of their IEP? And then she has an interesting comment at the end that I wanted the panel to address. Our worry is that school is just a place that watches my child versus unlocking their academic growth. So, Dory, would you mind taking that question first, Elise?
The parent can actually call me, and I'm happy to talk about the different schools. The other way that it can also happen is that looking through the directory, looking at the disability categories, and then calling that school directly and talking to the admissions director. I don't have a complete intimate knowledge of every single school and the types of students that, how the IEP might fit with every particular student at that program. So I can do generalization, and a parent can call me, happy to navigate through the list. I might ask a series of questions back and forth with the family, and then the parent can also call the school directly.
Can I bring up a point that when we do have a central IEP meeting and the decision is made that a student requires a private separate day, non-public school, we don't have the authority to place into a non-public school. We actually send out it's a referral process. So confidential educational documents, grades, etc., the IEP all go to these schools for their own admissions process. Each school could have something different, and I believe either Dory or Beth Ann mentioned this. The student will be invited in for a visit, a tour, sort of an interview. The school may come out to the public school to observe the student. Could be shadow days, all those pieces, and the non-public schools make their own determination if they feel they can meet the student's needs. What I would like to say is that if a student is not accepted at a school, it is not a rejection of your child. It is simply, number one, I would say right now is space and having enough staff. And also it may be that the student is not necessarily a good match for the cohort of students they currently have in that age or grade level.
Agree.
Let's go to our next question from Yihan. I think he's written it very well, so I'm just going to voice it for everyone. Based on my impression, the non-public school can provide education, especially in academics, according to the student's progress and abilities instead of their age. This seems like an essential thing missing in our current public schools. Does the panel have any comment?
I'm thinking in terms of maybe a starting point of how to start with the student, but they're still using the same curriculum and the same standards. Now, we also need to say that not all students are working towards the end goal of a high school diploma. They may be working on alternative learning standards, which again are also based in the state standards, and they're working towards the certificate of completion. So I don't know if that's what that question was going
maybe I'll
towards.
try to paraphrase. It might be helpful.
Okay.
I think there are families here in the Autism Society in our audience who, okay, well, I really want my student to learn, but they are 10 years old and they're still, when they do my testing, they're still at a first grade, level. And how can they really, as the public schools really set up to educate that child, if there's such a difference for the other 10-year-olds in my school and where they're at, can that even happen in public school, or they really need to be in a smaller environment, they can kind of catch up?
I think this goes to what Dory was talking about with the flexibility that is inherent in a lot of the non-public schools, where because it looks like we're talking about the grade, it not being, this is the second grade classroom. So a lot of non-public schools have models where they group children based on similar needs and similar, academic progress, even though their ages may be slightly different. Whereas the schools, but I do know there are public programs that do have some type of range bands for their placement programs in their smaller classrooms. But it's definitely something that is more happening in non-public schools than it is in public schools.
Thank you, Beth Ann. That's very helpful. Way of framing it. I think we want, I think with the question there, we want, more options, for students, basically to meet their needs regardless of their age. Dora, you mentioned this a little bit before. We had a comment saying that there's no ManSEF schools in their county. someone wants to know, could they find a school outside of the ones that are on the list, and kind of get, the non-public covered for that school? So they were kind of curious about the process. By, what if there's not one? Can I call up a school that, maybe it's a private school, and well, I want my student to be placed there. Is that possible?
Certainly a parent can make that call to any school that they feel might be serving, have the ability to serve their child. It's going to come down to whether the school system can fund that placement or not. So it really is a determination that needs to go back to an IEP meeting where, again, the school system would need to weigh in on that. But certainly, if I would recommend that parent have an advocate to help navigate the system and support them in the IEP meeting to discuss that with the school system. But yes, there are schools that, as I said, that are not in MANSEF that can also be appropriately funded by the public school system.
And
Go
Andy, I
ahead,
just
Beth Ann.
want to also add that, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds of IDEA, but IDEA does allow a process called unilateral parental placement, that I do recommend that you work with an advocate or an attorney before embarking, because there's certain things that you need to do on your end, but could also end up as through the due process of with the public school paying for a private placement when they weren't responsive to the need for a more restrictive or better service, more appropriate service for your student. I don't want to go into the process tonight, but I just want to let families know that that's part of IDEA.
Yeah, and I want a great opening, Beth Ann, a question I wanted to ask you before we got to the 8 o'clock hour, so we just did it. Can you just talk, you are a special education advocate. Can you just talk about what role a special education advocate can play in this process? And if people want to find a special education advocate, if they're worried about how to pay for a special education advocate, just talk a little bit about that process.
Sure. So a special education advocate is not an attorney, so we do not offer legal advice, but we are familiar with the state regulations and the IDEA. And so we can help families kind of break down the process in ways that are meaningful individually for their student, whether that's understanding the IEP document, working with ways within the IEP team to be more collaborative, to get your voice heard, how to raise concerns when you feel that your IEP team is stuck and you need to maybe elevate, your concerns higher. Please don't email Dr. Carrie Wright, our state superintendent, for an IEP team matter. There's processes. I don't know if this is also a good time for Dr. Brunson I don't know if she wants to talk about what they're introducing into Howard County as kind of an interim, like administrative, your administrative process for disputes. But then there's also that parental rights and procedural safeguards document that every parent should read. And it is available in several languages. That is going to give you an overview of what your rights and your child's rights are in special education. And a special education advocate can help navigate that with you as well. And then as far as affording a private advocate or an attorney, there are options within the state and locally with different organizations where you can get that type of support free of charge. And some advocates also have sliding scale or offerings as well. There's several directories online. MANSEF has a directory of advocates and attorneys and free legal. Awesome has their own resources that they can direct you to as well. You can contact, if you're in Howard County or Anne Arundel County, you can contact Awesome and they can pair you with one of us to do a consultation and more of it's more of a brief service. It's not a full advocacy service, but we can help kind of get you on the path to understanding exactly what it is with your individual situation you may need and give you some guidance there as well.
Melissa, do you want to address that administrative review that Beth Ann had mentioned?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're working really hard on, certainly coming in as a new director into special ed, is really, we've been listening to our families. We certainly have seen, a rise in state complaints, and we've seen some of the due process filings. It's, we know that whenever we see those, and if they're on the rise, especially, that signifies that parents are dissatisfied, typically with an IEP team decision. Maybe they feel like there aren't assurances of fate with their child. It could be many reasons, but the underpinning to me has a lot to do with trust. And that just kind of it just paints a picture. And so as a district, what we're trying to do is we want our families to come to us. We want to increase that opportunity for them to express their concerns to us. And so one of the new processes here is the administrative review process. And it's not, it's an alternative to, filing a state complaint. You certainly have the right to do that. You have the right for state complaints. You have the right to do process no matter what. We can't stop you from doing that. But this is sort of an opportunity for you, if you would like to, take advantage of it to handle a dispute based on a most recent IEP team decision. So if there was something that occurred, and I'll just give an example, let's say there was a disagreement at a child find meeting where the student may not have been found eligible for whatever reason, and the parent disagrees. And then if the parent disagrees and they can be offered an administrative review if we feel like it's an appropriate next step. If it's an appropriate next step, the administrative review can look into the case, meaning we'll have people at the central office level. I would be present. My compliance officers would be present. I call Joanne like a compliance officer, even though that's not her title. We have other directors, coordinators, depending on the alignment. And we have legal present. And what we would do is we would review the case and just see if, hear what the parent has told us, any supporting documents from the school or even from the parent. And we will just review it. And as a part of our review, we will get back to the parent within 14 days, which again, state complaints, due process complaints could be 30 days or more. So we would come back and then we won't necessarily render a decision necessarily, but we might say one or two things. We might say, we found evidence that maybe the IEP team needs to relook at. So we may recommend another IEP meeting, or we might actually uphold a decision that was made from the IEP meeting. And I will say that an administrative review is like for when we say complex cases, sometimes we have cases that have a lot of components to it, and there may be multiple years that the parent wants to have addressed in their dispute. That will not necessarily qualify for an administrative review. An administrative review is more for those immediate lighter cases, like I said, such as a child fine, or even let's say a disagreement with the ESY decision, but it's usually based on the most recent IEP meeting. So that's something we put in place for this school year. It's just starting. And we're at some point we're gonna, we talked about it at the board meeting. We are gonna start posting it on our website very soon. But it's something that we were working on and trialing out, and we're kind of like it. Again, it gives families an opportunity to work directly with the district, because quite frankly, even if it does go to a state complaint, the state will review the case, but it comes right back to us to actually review anyway. It really does. And so what it does for us to me, it has positive effects. I've seen it work well in Washington County. I certainly saw it work well in Montgomery County, just work well. And so we're just uplifting that here in Howard. And just, we added a little something, so there's little differences to how we do our process, but and we plan to make any tweaks and changes we can, because again, our goal is we want to rebuild the trust with our families, and that is one way that we feel we can do it. We can accomplish that goal.
CW had a quick follow-up with you. Can you remind us how does that get initiated, this process?
Good question. So typically, so right now, the way it's set up, again, if there's a dispute at an IEP meeting, let's say, again, the examples I gave you, in that meeting, again, as always, we do provide the Maryland procedural safeguards to our families. But depending on the case, we may actually say, and it depends. Like, let's say a dispute occurs and our instructional facilitator was present at the meeting. They would then talk to the coordinator that's aligned to that school and say there was a disagreement. And I think this might be one that we can consider for an administrative review. And so they would just see if it could be one. And then that could be offered to the family, like, hey, we have this process. We think that you should take advantage of it. That's one way. We've had just even recently, one of our community partners was working with a family and reached out to see, hey, could this be an administrative review case? It was an ESY decision that there was some disagreement around. There was a case that came to me by way of the parent contacting someone at the board level. It came to me. I looked into the case. I sent it down to my team to just kind of figure out what we can do with that case. Maybe it could be an administrative review. Again, is to, again, bring our families back to us so we can certainly look at these cases and address it. We give 14 business days as opposed to the state giving 30 or more. So people find that pretty attractive, that at least we're coming back with an answer quicker than the state potentially would.
And I know more will be discussed on it, but it sounds like, it's the IF or an instructional facilitator or someone close to the team that initiates it. But even in those examples, maybe an advocate has requested that to you, or even maybe the parent has reached out to someone higher up, and you kind of put it through an administrative review. What I like to say about it, it's a way to try to solve the problem a little faster than going to due process or some of the other mechanisms that we have out there. I'm going to tick off a couple questions that I do think that we've answered, but I want to make sure I know we did. I'm going to try to answer them, and I'll let my panel tell me if I got it wrong. Is there a summer program at non-public schools? I think we answered that it's not universal, but most non-public schools include ESY into their program. So if I can get that wrong, someone tell me if I got that wrong. There's also a question that about non-public schools and be able to have home ABA. And I think that's going to obviously be, and it depends on your provider. We know there are providers for ABA out there that have minimum number of hours per week, maybe 20 or 30 hours per week. And I think that could be a challenge because, when you're going to a non-public school, in the example Beth Ann gave, or even my daughter, she's on a bus, an hour and 15 minutes each way. Might be hard to do in-home ABA if the provider has a limit for hours. Let me bring back to the panel for a harder question. And I'm just going to paraphrase, and I would love some reaction from this comment. That a non-public may seem safer for some families, right? Smaller environment, more specialized. But then people are worried that they're not going to have an advanced academic curriculum in a ManSEF school, that'll be too basic. And a perception out there, and this is the experience of this family, that the only schools in Mansfield for people that have behavior problems. That the perception that that's what all the schools that people maybe know about are, or even that school systems might even in this example of this comment sounds like the school system only gave them schools that addressed behavior problems. So let's take that on, have a comment on that. Um, Safety, advanced academics, and then uh, are non-publics only for behavior problems.
It looks like Dory was going to take it because she
Yeah, I
turned
was
off
just
her
going to
mute.
say
So
that,
go ahead.
yes, I mean, some of the non-public schools have that as the criteria, as a disability, is that behavior is the paramount issue for that particular student. But no, not every MANSEF school obviously deals with aggressive behavior or the most challenging behaviors. I have heard, I do agree that there has been a perception that the academics are not as strong. And that's something that we are trying to recognize and address, because I think that perception is out there. And so it's a concern that I've certainly shared with all of our directors, that we need to be very mindful of that.
And what about that third comment about safety? I don't know if you or Beth Ann, you're about to jump in.
Yeah, from my own personal experience with my child, he was so dysregulated in school that he couldn't learn until his social emotional needs were met. And that was the only way to meet those needs. And I will say, because my son is also twice exceptional, he has a high cognitive profile. Um, he would have been more academically challenged in a district school than his experience in non-public school, but he also had a lot of psychiatric challenges and some hospital stays and things like that. And so for us, our primary concern was his ability to be comfortable in his own body and to function in order to even be open to learning. So for us, it was a decision that we had to make, and we feel that even though he didn't have the academic challenge that he probably could have reached, he wasn't going to be able to reach it in the state that he was in with a district program.
Thank you, Beth Ann. You could also address kind of one of our other comments from Marlene, and thank you, Arlene, for this comment. She said she'd love to hear parents' personal stories while they navigate the process of public to non-public placement, and she would love for someone to create a space where that is shared. Hopefully, we've got a little bit of that, tonight through this webinar. Um, in addition to Facebook groups, I encourage whatever county you're in, Arlene, uh, uh, your CCAT community is a place that this conversation is going to have happen. Um, you know, for the Autism Society of Maryland, certainly our mom's group is a place where that happened. Our dad's group is a place where those conversations happen. So definitely talking to other families. Our daughter did also end up on a non-public, and talking to someone else that actually met through our education committee. Just learned a little bit more about it, and help me, help us figure out, that would be a navigating, the story for us. So I really appreciate. Um, 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 that need to connect other parents. It's very powerful. I wanted to, there was a question I think I missed from Kelly. And thank you for putting it back in the chat. She wants to know, when is the right time to start exploring other options? Especially, if you're in a situation where IEP is taking a long time. It's been a while, that you don't feel like your needs are being met. Um, when is the start, process, for doing that? And also made this the typical, timeline. If you can, typical is such a hard word. Maybe some examples of timelines from, Beth Ann or Joanne or others that have worked with lots of families.
I'll just jump in really quickly. always found that it's helpful when parents have started also to do their own research. You know, even if they start with looking at the Mansef book, calling different schools. Sometimes the schools will allow you to come in and have a conversation. They're not going to let you necessarily go in and observe different classes for confidentiality purposes, but it's a helpful conversation if and when we get to the space for a central IEP meeting, that parents are already aware, you don't have to be, but have an idea of what school they feel would best meet their students' needs. It's that it helps us connect on a different level in terms of, all right, you've already gone out, or you have family friends that may have a student somewhere, and you have an understanding about the school and the type of students they serve. So you know your student best. So talking about, talking to different schools, finding those schools that work with the disability that your student has, and then getting some more information, that may be a helpful thing. I don't know that there's really a right time. I think that's really kind of a personalized decision.
Yeah, I will just jump in that we probably took 2 years of looking at, potential non-publics before, and we started looking before we got to the CEPT, because she was struggling at that time. So maybe there's no time that's too early to think about, what's out there, because it just gives you, at least for us, gave us a sense of what are some of the options out there.
And I would just also add, if you feel that your child is not making progress and you're documenting that and you're getting the data, and you're trying as much as you can with the IEP team to address any supports that could be helpful. Once you have that and there's still no progress, that's the time. Sometimes families do find that, this process of the IEP team and the school itself saying, okay, we really think that we've maxed out what we can do, and so we're going to send that referral to the CIEP team. I think that's where families get the most challenge, and when they start bringing in advocates and even attorneys to an IEP meeting. But definitely documenting everything, using your parental input on the IEP, and having an opportunity to share that at the meeting, making sure that you're heard. That's also really important, and expressing all of the things that you feel that your child may need that just, may not be included yet, and things that you want to try so that you can keep your child as close to home as possible. But yeah, once you've got documentation that, your child's just not making that progress that the team agreed that we should be seeing in a year, that's the time that you should be perhaps starting your search, and your own research into what those schools could offer.
Adrian, I see your hand. I'm gonna call on you, but I want to make sure I get Erica's question in, because it's an important one. And there was two questions about this. When anytime I can combine them. Erica wanted to know the difference between the graduation program and a certificate of completion. And there was another question. Let me pull it into it. That said, is that the main difference between non-publics and publics, between those two? So can we please talk about the difference between graduation program and certificate of completion? I don't know when the panel wants to address that.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The question was just basically, what's the difference between graduating and having a certificate of completion?
So one is the high school diploma from that particular county, and the other would be the certificate of completion. And there are endorsements now that you can also have on the certificate, so that's important to know about. But I mean, again, it's of getting the required credits for a high school diploma.
Right, and maybe, but someone want to add into that?
I just wanted to say that they're based on the different non-public schools. Some of them can do both. They can educate a student working towards that college and career ready piece with earning a diploma, and others also working on the alternative learning standards and those assessments. So that's another also designation when you're looking at schools and what they're able to do. And that can also be found ManSEF site or in the handbook.
Right. So it's not correct to say once you're in non-publics, you will not be able to graduate high school.
That is,
and
yes.
the certificate of completion, like just to emphasize, there's an alternative set of standards that you have to meet to be in the. But if you're in graduation, you have to meet all the academic standards that anyone graduating from any school, public school in the state of Maryland would have to meet. So that's really the main difference. We're getting close to it.
I just add one other piece about the alternative learning outcomes. You have to meet certain criteria, and first and foremost would be a significant cognitive impairment.
Yeah, the State Department of Education just yesterday had a presentation regarding the eligibility for students to participate in the ALT. And so they're going to be proposed COMAR regulations that will be published in the Maryland Register soon. You can also look at the document of what's being proposed. It's on the MSDE website. I really recommend parents weigh in on this document and school systems because, again, the federal government wants to cite Maryland for having too many children using the ALT. And again, it's an IEP team decision and what's best for your student. So whether you go diploma track or certificate track.
Adrian, I see you have a hand there. I want to call on you to jump in here.
Yes, hi, my name's Adrian. I'm a parent. I just wanted to give a comment about having an advocate. An advocate, well, I've had a pretty good experience with an advocate. I don't have one right now, but I did in 2024 to 2025, and we were not at the point of um, at the disputing a referral or anything. I contracted much earlier in the process, and the advocate participated in every IEP meeting. And the benefit I found was because like education is not my training, like as a professional, the advocate really helped me understand um, what the options were at any given point, and was able to coach, in some sense, coach my husband into what points we should probably raise at any given IEP meeting, how to get things rolling efficiently. And I found it extremely beneficial. We were able to benefit in a placement change to I guess you call it district or county program. And so far it's working out very well. But I just wanted to um, sort of clarify that you can bring an advocate in much earlier and kind of to be your sidekick. And it was extremely beneficial. I met the advocate at a special education resource, and depending on who you work with, they're not tied geographically. I saw someone say they're looking for one in Calvert County, but you can pick whoever, fits with your personality and work with you wherever you are. So, I mean, they would need to be familiar with Maryland education system, but I just wanted to offer that as a comment on working with an advocate.
Well, I think that was a lovely comment for us to start to end our evening, because what I took from it is you found support on your journey. Everyone here and these parents, all these passionate comments are obviously passionate advocates for their kids. And this is doing this journey alone when maybe not everyone on this call is here because they've had a moment where their child has struggled with their IEP, but I think that's probably reason a lot of people are here. And getting the different resources, understanding your options, reaching out for mutual support to organizations that are represented here tonight. You're not alone in this process. We want to support you in it. Like Beth Ann said, please reach out to us, the Autism Society. and other organizations that can help you. We will get around the recording, and I will make sure to save the chat. A couple questions, we kind of just ran out of time a little bit here to answer all of them. I will make sure to save them, and if there's ones that we did not answer, we can post some of the answers, to those questions we are not able to
Can I
get.
do two answers real quickly?
Oh yeah, go for it. Go for
One
it.
was to a gentleman who asked about the private pay versus public pay,
Yeah,
which
go for
schools,
it.
if you go to the ManSef membership directory, it will tell you which schools accept private pay.
Okay.
And then to Jamie regarding the information about a child has to fail the LRE, that's just a nomenclature term that everybody sort of uses. I do have legal citations that if you email me or call the ManSef office tomorrow, I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Dory. Dory, you were so generous to give out your phone number, in addition to your website. So thank you for that. I hope we don't take all your time tomorrow, but Dory has a lot of information about non-public schools. All right, well, with that, I'm going to close out our webinar tonight. Thank our wonderful panelists for being here, sharing such information. We filled up all this time with questions. It was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to continuing it all with you and seeing some of the new things that are happening in this space. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.